Hi, and welcome back to ConTinual. It's time for another episode of Hot Off the Press, the show about new releases and the authors that are bringing them to you. I'm your host, Jim Nettles, and before we dive in to find out who is going to be adding to that to-be read pile, let's see who is here to go around the room. So, Kindle, you are up first.
Hi, I'm Kindle Alexander, and I write gay romance.
And
That's all you
Frank?
get.
My name is Frank W. Butterfield. I write gay romance, mystery, and adventure.
Chantal?
I'm Chantal Mer, and I write romance with my co-author, Susan Scott Shelley, who is not here tonight.
Kim?
Hi, I'm Kim Fielding, and I write horror, science fiction, fantasy, and gay romance.
Misty?
Hi, I'm Misty Massey, and I write pirate fantasy adventures.
And Annabella?
Hi, I'm Annabella Michaels, and I write contemporary gay romance.
And so the love is in the air tonight. So let's start finding out a little bit about what's being added to that to-be read pile. So, Kindle, why don't you tell us a little bit about the story you're bringing to us tonight?
The story that, I have performance anxiety. You know that. And so going first, you always make me go first. And that gives me a little bit of, performance anxiety.
You can do it. You can do it.
I can do it. But you know what? I'm a real fan of yours. So it's so exciting to be here with you.
Me?
Yes.
Oh my God,
Super,
thank you.
super exciting to be here with you. And all of you, honestly, they put together such great panels and great authors that I come away from these events so much stronger and have so much more knowledge. And I just love, that I'm here with you guys. The book I'm bringing tonight is a new book released for us. It is Level Up, and it is a new adult. My first time in trying to write a reasonable size story, and it didn't come easy. It was painful, and this book took longer than any other book that we've ever written, and I know I'm doing a great job of selling it right now. But Level Up is a work of love, and it's new adult, and it's a gaming, finding your way, look at the youth today. And of course, there's a love story involved in it. And I like, my guys to kiss each other like most of you do. So a lot of that happens inside the book.
So what kind of, I'm assuming then it's going to be all around the gaming environment. So what kind of story are we going to get along those lines?
Well, it focuses, what's so fascinating to me is that youth of today is just a different beast altogether. And everything that they do centers around being online in some way or another, which is very foreign to me and the way that my life is. So we really look at how the two come together and how they work through the apps and the online process and the social media and the videos and their whole world, and then try to do that in a 60,000 word book.
So Frank, how about you? What are you bringing to us?
I'm bringing The Seductive Sellout, which is the third of a trilogy that's in series. These are actually books 4, 5, and 6. And these, speaking of hard books to write, these are the hardest books I've ever written. They're about 210,000 words total. Started off just to be this one book, The Sordid Socialite. And then it kind of merged into a second book, and then the second book merged into a third book, or not merged, but split. And the premise is basically, it's all centered around, it takes place in early 1971. It's all centered around the concept of radical chic, which most people don't apparently remember, but there was a party that Leonard Bernstein threw at his Upper East Side apartment in '69 and invited a bunch of Black Panthers. And when Tom Wolfe got hold of that story, he wrote a very snarky article in the New York Magazine and about radical chic and So what I did is I took that and I said, well, I've got these characters who have been out since 1953 publicly, and they would probably end up being radical chic for San Francisco, which is where they live. And it's all about what happens where people are throwing parties around them, which is what Tom Wolfe was talking about. And then things go askew. It turns out the person throwing the parties has an ulterior motive. And so the seductive sellout is when we finally know who is doing what and how it's going to be dealt with. And it's a difficult thing for the people involved, because it turns out that our heroes end up having to be the agents of someone's destruction, which is a difficult thing for them to do. And but at the very end, they end up not having to do it. Somebody else takes care of it for them. But
Spoilers.
anyway, yeah, well, if you get through the first two books, you know that's exactly what's going to happen, because they're in this book, in the fifth book, they're just talking constantly of like, we got to deal with her. We've got to deal with her. And we don't know how we're going to do that. And so the final book, the one that just came out, is basically how it's dealt with. So it was a lot of fun to write, but I had to literally write one scene and then like take a break and then go write another scene and then take a break, which I normally don't have to do. I can usually like do 2 or 3 chapters in a sitting. And this one was just a lot of intensity and a lot of emotion. So.
Chantal, how about you? What are you bringing to us?
So we have Surprise coming. Oh, you can't really see that. And it is actually a male story. So we have, and it's the 4th book in our Love and Rugby series. And so it's centered around a recreational rugby team set in Philadelphia. And we have 2 teammates who have been hooking up without anyone really knowing. And then they're at a New Year's Eve party and meet the local weather guy, and there's a connection, and the two of the guys have never been in a triad before, so it's about kind of figuring that out. All of them come with some significant childhood trauma, so it's figuring that out as well, and kind of learning how they can all support each other and fall in love. So, and it's the first time Susan and I have written a triad, so it was an interesting experience, figuring out how we were going to delve that out, because usually we each take a POV, so we had a third POV we had to write, so we had to figure that out.
Kim, how about you? What are you bringing to us this evening?
So my newest book is a fairly angsty contemporary gay romance. It's called Desert. I changed my publisher changed the title, so I keep saying the wrong one, because they said the original title wasn't romancy enough, which it probably wasn't. So the actual title is The Taste of Desert Green, and one guy is out of a probably misguided, deeply sense of loyalty, he's stuck with a dying tourist attraction in the middle of the Mojave Desert, a place that has like dinosaur stuff and some outer space stuff and that kind of thing, and it's slowly going extinct, and he's kind of stuck there, and he by happenstance meets up with the other guys. The first guy's George, second guy's name is Zephyr, and his name suits him because he's very much a free spirit who doesn't really have a home, kind of floats around. Zephyr prefers to wear more feminine clothing, and he's kind of has a very particular sense of self, but Zephyr's also made some poor decisions in his past that come back to haunt them, and so they keep kind of bouncing against each other, and one of them is very much stuck in space in place, while the other one is very much the opposite, and that creates conflicts between them and between the kinds of things that are going on in their lives.
Misty, how about you?
Well, it's been a minute since my first book came out. I ended up falling into the hole of depression that so many writers do, and couldn't write for a long time. But at long last, Kestrel's Dance the sequel to Mad Kestrel is finally available. I finished it. See, there's words inside. So it really is a book, and I finished it. It's the second book in the series, again featuring Captain Kestrel and her rowdy band of pirates. They have been working for the king secretly for a year, and seemingly doing well, but she still feels the heavy hand of the Denisobans always waiting to drop down and take her. And she's sent out on an odd mission. They should be staying in port for a while because it's getting ready to be storm season, but instead she's sent out on a mission to find something, presumably on the king's behalf, but she's sent out by the Denisoban advisor Menjelig. And once she gets out to sea, she discovers that the mission is not what it seems, and friends that she thought were long gone are needing her help. And there's all kinds of things that she's got to take care of. She can't turn away from any of them, or it might cost them all their lives. So,
Kill them all. Annabella, how about you?
Mine is Etched on My Heart. This is the second book in the My Heart series. And it also combines with the Hamilton's Heroes series. So it's kind of a crossover between the two. It's about Jasper, who we, of course, were introduced to in the first My Heart book, Written on My Heart. And he has a very difficult and traumatic past that he has always kept to himself. None of his best friends know about it. And so that ends up coming to a head in this book. And his love interest is Max, who is the newest member of the Hamilton security team, who are all ex-military forces, special forces, that are working private security now. And Jasper, when I was writing it, I thought he just deserved a hero. He needed a hero. And so I merged the two series together, and that's what you got.
So looking at the stories, I mean, we've got a lot of new work here, as well as a lot of continuing series. So Frank, especially looking at, and you started hinting at this a little bit, what inspired you to go down this particular path?
Well, it's funny because the whole idea of radical chic is something that I think actually applies now. It's almost like we've come back to it again. And it's just like if Tom Wolfe had Twitter, I'm just really glad he didn't, because nobody can outsnark him. He snarks better than anybody. But it just occurred to me, like, what would it be like if instead of along with, not really instead of, but along with like the Black Panthers, if there were gay people invited to these parties? Because that actually, in the radical chic, that happens kind of later on in San Francisco, and Armistead Maupin wrote about it in Tales of the City, that takes place about 4 or 5 years after these books take place. He talks about that a little bit, but he has a great scene in one of his books about a woman being invited to a cocktail hour that's about rapping, and like the kids did back in the 70s. And there are all these socialites, and then there's this woman who's a Native American who's been asked to talk about her rape experience in front of all these other women, just talk about it. And that was what I was kind of trying to get to, is like this idea of not really understanding what you're getting into, which is the way this group of people who are going to all these parties, they don't really understand what they're doing because they don't understand what's happening in their culture. But interestingly, anyone who was gay in the 70s really had a very clear idea of what was going on, along with anyone who was like 18, 19, 20, 21. But these are all people who are in their 30s. So they were just kind of clueless. And so they're just trying to figure out what it is, who all these people are that are coming out of the woodwork that when they were younger weren't on the radar anywhere. And suddenly there's all these people who've suddenly emerged since like 67. And that's very confusing. But then, there's a spider amongst all of them who's figured out a way to manage and manipulate and use this kind of newfound interest. And that's what makes the story. That's not what I started with. I actually started with something very different, but as usual, the characters took over and they're like, no, let's tell you what's really going on. So, but that's where it came from. Is that idea of radical chic, because it feels to me like we're in the middle of that again, but nobody kind of realizes that's what's going on, at least in my opinion. So that's where it started.
So
Hey, your books
Chantal,
sound
oh,
fascinating. His books sound fascinating. Like, I want to go read them right now. Can we cut this short so we can all just get started on these books he's talking about?
you get to add it to the TV red pile here in a few minutes. Chantal, how about you? What inspired you guys to take on a new challenge in terms of telling the story, and how did you decide to pick rugby?
Well, so rugby is like so fun to watch. I mean, Susan is she loves sports. I really could care less, but I like the team aspect of it. But I love watching rugby. I have no idea what goes on, but it's so fun to watch. So we just thought that would be, a fun sport. And we didn't want to do professional because we'd have to know way more about rugby than we do. So we thought a rec team would be fun, and it's a gay rec league, and there actually, there are numerous gay rugby leagues. There's one in Philadelphia, there's Baltimore, DC, New York, like there's a bunch around. So I follow all of them on Instagram. And we just decided, like, one of the characters is Greer, and he appeared, I think, in the second book. He appeared, and Susan kept saying, he's bugging me, like he needs a story. And so he just kind of, and we were trying to figure out who his love interest would be. And he was really, bugging both of us as we were writing the first 3 books. And then we have a few novellas scattered in this series as well. And it just came. We decided he really needed a triad. He needed to be in a triad. He needed that. I don't know. I'm not even sure how it, like, I'm sitting here like talking, thinking, I don't even know what I'm saying, because I don't even really remember how it ended up, that it was a triad.
That's what happens when you let the characters loose.
I know, right? I'm like, what am I saying? I don't even know. I'm making stuff up. Like, I really can't remember.
I hate to tell you, but that's what writers do. Kim, how about you? What inspired this one?
I had sort of 3 pieces of inspiration that all came together. This one's been percolating for a few years, and one of them is the Mojave Desert. I live in California Central Valley, and the desert's a few hours away, and I drive through it now. In fact, we were just there a couple of weeks ago, and it's a fascinating place. I mean, when you zoom through it desert, because there's some like prickly things and it's hot. But when you spend a little time there, you realize it's fascinating, and there's a lot of variety in the flora and the fauna, and the people who are in the desert are really interesting, and it's full of these quirky surprises that you come across. So the desert is almost kind of like a character. And then the second thing that inspired me was tourist attractions, like not necessarily the big ones, but the little ones. And I like doing road trips. I've done road trips with my family quite a bit. And, you stop at these little things and you start thinking about who are the people who started this and who are continuing to run it, even sometimes through some really hard times. So I was thinking about that. And then the third thing was this was a few years ago now. I was taking Amtrak to LA from my house, and it's a pain in the neck. You take the train from my house, and then you get to Bakersfield, which I'm sorry if any of you are from Bakersfield or are very fond of Bakersfield, but I'm absolutely certain that Bakersfield is the gateway to hell. It's like it's my least favorite place on the planet.
Funny you
But
mentioned that. In a book I wrote, I actually blew it up as a gateway to hell.
I did too in one of my books. So yeah, I mean, it's just like there's just something about Bakersfield, and I mean, it's not like where I live is all that exciting. And I always joke that Fresno's motto should be, "Well, at least we're not Bakersfield." But there, anyway, so you get to Bakersfield on the train, and then you have to switch to a bus, and you take a bus the rest of the way to LA. And as my bus was pulling out, there's a bunch of really seedy motels right over in that section of town. And I saw somebody walking across the parking lot of one of these motels. And the person looked like they were probably male, but they were dressed in a skirt and kind of overdressed for the time of day. Most likely they were a sex worker. And they'd stopped in the middle of the parking lot and they were adjusting their stocking. And, it was like, we're stopped at a traffic light. So I'm watching this person for maybe 20 seconds. But you just start thinking about who is this person? What's their story? And that came together with those other pieces eventually. And that's how I ended up with this particular novel.
Misty, what led to the sequel?
Oh, what led to the sequel?
Well, or what motivated this story in the sequel, I guess I should ask.
Well, I've always had a general idea of where the story was going to go. In Mad Kestrel, she's still an underling on the ship. She's still second to the captain. She wants to run her own ship. She wants to be completely free, but there are still things in her way. In Kestrel's Dance, of course, she's finally become the captain of her own ship, but she's still trapped in the world of the king and his rules and the island, the rules that govern the islands. And I have always been, I can handle living in the world. I can handle following the rules, but there's a part of me that wants to go and just live on a beach in a shack and not be bothered by anything that I have to do. And there's just something really attractive about that. Not so much, I'm kind of off the grid, I guess is the best way to put it. There's something attractive about that for me, because after a while, when you've just lived so many years following the rules, you just want to scream and throw everything in the ditch and run away. And so I'm indulging that feeling and working through that feeling in these books. So, because by the end, hopefully she will be ultimately free and clear and her own person. Hopefully.
Well, Annabella, how about you? What inspired this one for you?
Well, about 3 years ago, I was finishing Written on My Heart, and Jasper was already talking to me and told me what the basics of his story. He told me what his background was. So I knew the trauma he'd been through, and I was all ready to write it. I had the cover ready. I had everything. And then around that same time, someone I loved came to me and told me they'd had basically the same experience. And it was very hard personally to work through that. And so it took me 3 years to write it, to finally build the strength up enough to work through those demons on page. And I don't want to make it sound like it's this all dark book. It's not. But it does deal with a very real, very serious situation. So,
how about you, Kendall? What inspired this one?
Can we go back to Annabelle?
Oh, sure.
What book is this that you're talking about?
this is Etched on My Heart.
Is it out now?
Yeah.
How do I not know that? Where have I not seen? Why haven't I seen that?
I don't know. It's out.
I think I've read all of Annabella's work. I can't believe I don't know about that. Again, can we end this now so we can just all go read and come back? The inspiration for my book is if you've read any of my stories, I bring characters forward from books, you know, and I generally don't like to write a series, even though I have a lot of duets and a lot of characters that come forward, but I don't like to tie people into boxes that I wrote the story previously. Does that make any sense? Does anybody else go through that or not? Is it just me? Like, I feel like I've painted a character into a corner before I knew them, you know? Does
Yeah.
that make
Oh,
sense?
that's easy to do. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. But these two guys are much like Annabella. It took years for one of them to come forward. And then the other one is part of this breakaway grouping of books. But what was so fascinating to me is there's so many connections that are made online now, and the whole world and your whole connection is made online. And I do it with friends, I do it with people that I've really grown to love and are a big part of my life. But when you take it out of the computer into the real world, you know, sometimes that can be difficult, especially when you've gotten to know everything about a person except for how they look or feel or act physically. And that was the inspiration for the book, was to bring those relationships out of the computer and into the real world.
Well, and I think that's a good place to go, because every story, the fundamentals of story, it's about the characters. Who are we getting to see? What are the part of their lives we're getting to see and experience with them and go through with them? So Chantal, as you were going through and building this story, tell us a little bit more about some of the people we're going to meet and a little bit of their lives that we're going to get to experience.
Yeah. So, you know, like I said, Greer, I think he was just a name, actually. Like, I think he was like a name because we needed a name for one of the rugby players, and Susan threw out like Greer, and then he just again started dancing around saying, look at me, look at me. And that's kind of who he is. He's very look at me, you know, look at me. And then Owen is a physical therapist and also plays on the rugby team. And he's been around. He may have even been in book 1. And so we never really thought about putting those two guys together. And again, I can't even remember how it happened. And the guy that they end up with, Storm, he was in a novella that we wrote. And he was actually a jerk. He was dating 2 guys at the same time. So it was like, and again, this is all it's Susan's fault, because she, with that, said, but I don't want to make him too jerky, because I think he needs to be a hero and you know, somewhere down the road. And I was like, okay. So yeah, it's Susan's fault that we
She didn't show up, so you can
she
blame her
didn't
all
show
day
up, so I'm
long.
gonna blame her. No, yeah. So I mean, and one of the things with this series was only supposed to be a 3-book series, and it's 4 books, and we have 2 novellas, and then we have another series that's kind of sparking from this, because the characters just kept talking to us. Yeah, so it really is about like these characters just start talking, and they have like Greer, he actually had a really significant trauma that occurred when he was a child, and that really
Sounds like it informs the story.
thank you. I was like blanking on the word, like I know words. It's because it's past my bedtime, honestly. But yeah, but I mean, it really informs who he is, and it was interesting as we started talking more about Greer, because I really feel like it's his story. We just kept delving deeper and deeper into like what his what, you know, why he was the way he was. And that was that. I mean, that took us, you know, it took us about a year to figure out.
So Kim, how about you? Tell us a little bit more about our fun desert rat and
Desert rat, yeah. So George is the guy who runs this tourist attraction. He's spent his whole life living in this tiny little town in the desert. He's the third generation running this thing, and he's got this really deep sense of loyalty, which is both a strength to him, but also sometimes it's too deep. And as Chantal was just talking about, as I was writing it, I really got to know him a lot better, and I realized this is a man who has a lot of anger. He doesn't seem very angry. He loves interacting with people, and he generally has a really positive outlook, but he also has this kind of core of anger that he doesn't let out very often until things happen that push him in the right direction. So kind of exploring that was really interesting. He's quirky. I mean, I think anybody who lives in a place like in a tiny town in the middle of the desert is going to have quirks, and which, I mean, quirky people are my favorite people. And in his case, he has synesthesia, and with his particular synesthesia, synesthesia is when people's senses basically are kind of cross-wired, and he tastes colors. Which is why the title of it is The Taste of Desert Green. And so he other people might think of that as weird. He actually thinks of it as a gift, but it kind of gives this other kind of level to how he experiences things that's a little bit different. He's always been a little bit different. He's used to that, and he's comfortable with that, but he's maybe hasn't explored some of his deeper emotions until he comes into contact with Zephyr, who is he compares himself at one point to a tumbleweed. He's kind of floating around, and Zephyr's good at pushing people's buttons, and Zephyr's greatest strength, I guess, is independence, but that can also be a problem if you're too independent. He's never really had any connections to anyone, and he's good at pushing people's buttons, and he's good at pushing George's buttons, which can be a challenge and a source of conflict, but it can also lead to growth. So Zephyr is trying to find out in a way who he is and where he wants to be in the world, and George is questioning his assumptions about where he is and where he wants to be. So there's sort of this interesting crossroads, which is good because literally the town is at a crossroads. And there's a sort of a supporting cast of characters that I had a lot of fun writing, just because people who live in the desert are fun, and so they all have their own reasons for living in the desert. There's one guy who, he's been living out in his little shack out in the desert. He's got his acreage, and he doesn't want anything to do with the government. And, he smokes weed, and he always has, and he's got his thing. But, and when the world shuts down, he's perfectly happy because he's been out there for the last 30 years anyway. What does he care? So there's those kinds of characters that I think are a whole lot of fun.
So Misty, tell us a little bit about who we get to meet. Not only Kestrel, but who are some of the others we get to meet on the ship?
Well, you're going to meet Philip McAvery again, who was the love interest in the first book. He's the love interest again, and you're going to get to know more about him. So I got fussed out a lot after Mad Kestrel, because Mad Kestrel is a chase. It's they hit the ground running at the beginning, and they can't stop until the very end. And so there was no time for romantical type behavior going on, because they were in a hurry trying to get stuff done. And I got fussed out about that by some readers, that how dare I not have kissing and smooching and snuggles and all this stuff. So I said, fine. So there's kissing and smooching and snuggles in the second book. But you'll meet Philip, and you'll also I've got a new character. Her name is Nazreen, and she is a mysterious woman with a strange connection to Kestrel that Kestrel doesn't know anything about until they meet about midway through the book. And she has a lot to offer. So I was excited to put her in, and she is one of the reasons that I was a performing belly dancer for many years in the Charlotte area. And so I was happy to bring my dance experience into this book. And Nazreen was that extension of me that that showed up in the book to communicate all of that to Kestrel. So she's a lot of fun. She's an older character, and she's very wise and but very mysterious. And I really enjoyed creating her and bringing her into the adventure. So,
Annabella, how about you?
This book has a really fun cast in it, because since I merged the two series together, one of my favorite things to write is found family. I just love when you have this close knit group of friends that become your chosen family, because I think chosen family is so much better than the ones you're born to anyway. And so you've got all of the characters from the Hamilton's Heroes series and the characters from the My Heart series that are all merged together in this. And there's a lot of different scenarios where you see them in the groups. And the friends add like this lightness, little bits of humor, you know, just so much more to it to keep it from being too heavy of a book. And especially Travis, Jasper's best friend Travis. And he's supposed to be the third book in the My Heart series. So he's quite a character, and already readers are asking me when I'm going to get his book out.
So Kendall, how about you? Who are we getting to meet and get a little bit more, or to know a little bit more about in this one?
I'm trying to not ask questions about Travis. In this book, we bring forward Chad Reeves. He is the son of Dylan Reeves from Secret. And Dylan started the wildly successful social media site Secret. Chad's coming forward and then brings his whole family and that whole book forward to catch up on Dylan, who was secretly, he had a secret. I love saying that. I love saying that. And how many times can I say secret at one time? And then we bring forward Ducky Rains, who him and his brother started a fitness app. And Ducky's whole existence was on that computer, as I've said many times. But in bringing forward this fitness app, he starts using the app and starts getting out in the world. And these two friends that were friends on Secret and gaming on Twitch lived very close to one another, but never met. And they were very, very close friends. And Secret helped, Secret social media site helped the app grow. And you just bring out all those people come forward, all the sisters and brothers and bad friends and good friends. And that's the best part of writing these stories is those side characters, because you can make them have so much personality, and they get to say the most crazy, unreasonable things. And it's okay because they're not the main character. They're the side character. And I love writing
their own books.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
how you get
actually.
spinoffs.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. But yeah, that's who our guys are.
Frank, how about you?
Well, one of the characters that is in this book but is not alive is Nick's mother. So Nick Williams is the narrator of these books and is the main character, and his husband Carter Jones. They're like, everything revolves around them. And but before I say this, I want to just say something to Annabella. I just realized I read one of your books about 3 or 4 years ago, and I have always in the back of my mind used that camaraderie that you use, the found family, to build, because I have two different series where there's two main characters who have bodyguards that are always around them. And I use that I use some of the things that I read in your books that very much inspired me. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, because it's like I couldn't figure out how to. I didn't know I needed to know how to write that because I didn't know about the need for bodyguards. But then when that started coming up in these two series, I was like, oh, I have a reference point for that. So
Thank you.
yeah,
That
thank
means
you very
me.
much. So anyway, so Nick, when he was 7 years old, his mother left just out of the blue. And it turns out that she thought she had cancer and she didn't want to die in front of her kids. So she went and sailed off to Acapulco. This is 1929. And then later we find out that no, she didn't actually die. But through trickery, she was convinced not to get back in touch with the family because she thought that they had basically didn't want her to come back. So she went to New York because she got better. It turned out she was being poisoned. And as soon as she got away from her poisoner, she suddenly got better. So she moved to New York, and then she moved to Vermont and then Cape Cod, which is where she died in 47. So in this series, and this always happens in my books, there's always two or three different, there's a B plot and a C plot usually. And the B plot in all three of these books is Nick finding out more about his mother, and including when in this book, because the Breck girl, don't tell the current owners of Breck that I stole their picture, but I did. And she's standing in front of the Peninsula Hotel in Hong Kong. And so they go to Hong Kong to take care of the person they need to deal with. And there, Nick runs into someone that he's related to. He can tell because the guy has his eyes. Nick has these very beautiful milk chocolate eyes. And turns out that the guy he runs into, his mother's living in Hong Kong. They're British. Well, they're Welsh, but they're British. And once Nick gets in the news and everybody knows who he is, she realized she was related to him. And so she started doing all this family history. So by the time he shows up in her life, she's got this whole thing set out. And it turned like she has this whole explanation of where Nick's mother's family came from. And it goes back to this Earl in Wales in the early 18th century and a bastard son of his that they're all descended from, that sort of thing. But so Nick's mother is like very much part of the story, even though she's been dead for 15 years or 25 years. But I do love the fact that she kind of is always hanging out around this story. And it's actually kind of where Nick's concern about what he's actually going to do and how he's going to be involved in dealing with this woman. His mother, it's not like his mother's talking to him, but he's always thinking about I really wish I could talk to her about this. I really wish I could just say, I don't know what to do with this. So that's a character who, this is the 37th book that involves these characters. And Nick's mother has been in almost every one of these books because she just never goes away. And she's really cool. I really like her. She has beautiful brown hair. I love writing about the physical descriptions of her because when she was dying, she was being poisoned with arsenic, so she was looking more and more beautiful as time was going by, as happens to people who are being poisoned with arsenic. And so Nick's memory of her is just this stunning woman who's just gorgeous. And then he meets some people who are like, yeah, she was really beautiful right before she died. And so anyway, I love writing about her, and I should stop talking now because I could literally talk about her for a long time.
But now I think you have the inspiration to create the paranormal romance spinoff of it so that the ghost of mom can come back.
Well, yeah, I do that already, but no, I think Alexandra is going to stay kind of off in the distance. But there are others. Nick's great grandfather is constantly showing up. And in fact, in this book, he shows up, and in a dream, his great grandfather basically attacks him and punches him really hard 2 or 3 times and then kicks him. And when he wakes up, he's like, he feels sore and he can't figure out why. And then he remembers the dream and is like, wait, but that was a dream. And he's like, but was it a dream? So yeah, Nick's great grandfather he's this old Welshman. He was the miner who came and got the gold rush money in California. And he's a real character. They're all just a little nuts.
So, one of the best parts about being a writer is the rabbit holes you get to go down, the things where where you're working on something, all of a sudden the characters tell you, oh, no, 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 we're not doing that. We're going to go this way. Or just the different things you get to find out and learn. So, Kim, what was the thing that you learned or that surprised you, piece of research, whether it made it in or not, when you were working on this particular book? What was the thing that you went and said, okay.
The rabbit holes engulf me always. I'm so, my day job is academic. So anytime I have the excuse to research things, I'm just sucked in. But in this particular book, I ended up spending a fair amount of time researching the botany of the Mojave Desert, which I hadn't known much about. I have a thing about Joshua trees. I have one tattooed on me. So I knew some stuff about Joshua trees, and they're pretty cool. They live only in the Mojave Desert and only at certain elevations, and they're at real risk of dying out with climate change, in part because they think they were originally spread by giant sloths, and the giant sloths have been extinct for like 13,000 years, so that they're 30,000 years. So that's a problem. But I learned about lots of other really interesting. One thing I learned is that tumbleweeds, which you see a lot of in the desert, and actually even where I live, aren't actually native to California. So who knew? Because they're all over the place. But I learned about those. I learned about all of the many very interesting kinds of things that can poke you in the desert. One of my personal favorites is the jumping cholla, or it's sometimes called the teddy bear cholla. It looks kind of fuzzy from a distance, but it is really super spiky, and each spike has tiny little barbs, and the pieces break off really easily because that's how it spreads. So if you like look at it the wrong way, it attaches itself to you, and then it's really hard. And then the idea is you carry it off somewhere, and that piece falls, and it makes a new cholla. My younger daughter was terrified of jumping cholla, I think because of the name when she was little, because I think she was just convinced they were going to like get her, but they kind of seem like they do. So I learned a lot about all sorts of really fascinating desert plants, and also the extinct animals that lived in what's now the Mojave. So things like camels and bison and stuff like that. So that's pretty cool.
The flora and the fauna.
Mhm.
I figured you're going to tell me that you found the guy that has the real UFO underneath the
Well, yeah, that may be
dragon
the case too. Yeah. You never know what you're going to find out in the desert. I'm never, we were driving through the desert 2 weeks ago, and we saw this really bizarre looking building up on the hillside. I'm like, what on earth is it? It was big. And as we got farther, we saw the sign, and it turns out it's a monastery. It's a Catholic monastery, but with the monks who live there are Vietnamese. And they built this thing in the Lucerne Valley in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And it's really cool. You just never know what you find in the desert.
And you want to hear something really interesting? That monastery, I'm going to say it's probably been 25 years now, but one morning somebody went out to the monastery and all of the brethren were gone. And somebody had gotten in and had killed them looking for valuables and stuff. And
Wow.
so the ones that were in place at the time had all been taken out, and they found them later out in the desert.
Wow,
But
I didn't know about that.
yeah, I was
could be
working
wrong,
on a Call of Cthulhu adventure at the time, and I went, I saw it in the paper, and I went, okay, I got to write an adventure around. So
yeah, I could see that.
there was also a Perry Mason episode that was filmed at that monastery.
ooh,
Who
Yeah.
knew? I had no idea. We were on our way to Big Bear, which I'd never been to before. So we're going
I
through a
love
part
Big
of the
Bear.
desert I hadn't been for. So now I've learned all these new things. And so that's a great thing about the Mojaves. You spend, it doesn't, on the first glance, it just looks like desert, and you think, oh, boring. And then you start digging around, and it is just one of the most fascinating places on the planet, I think.
And I think there is something beautiful though about the desert. Like it's a different kind of beauty. Like it's,
Oh, definitely.
I mean,
Absolutely.
it's amazing. 'Cause my dad, when I was a kid, lived in Apple Valley and worked in Barstow, and like I'd fly in from Pennsylvania, which it's green and and go there, but it's a whole different beauty.
Yeah, and it is just gorgeous in its own complete. It's not like any
Yeah.
other place. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Misty, what did you discover on your writing journey for this one?
Well, I was designing another island, and I thought that I wanted to have some sort of activity going on, like not maybe a whole volcano, but some sort of activity going on the island. And I ended up ditching that. But along the way, while I was looking into how to make my island be creepy and scary and active, I discovered the Darvaza crater in Turkmenistan. It's also known as the Gates of Hell or the Door to Hell. It's a burning natural gas field that has been burning since 71. Nobody's really sure exactly how it started burning. The common wisdom says that Soviet geologists set it on fire because they thought they were going to burn off excess methane, except that didn't burn off, it just kept burning. And so it has been burning ever since. It's a huge tourist attraction. People love to go camping out in the desert again, out in the desert, and then walk over. And as far as I know, they really don't have much of a barrier around it. There might be just a little collapsible fence that they've set up, but you can kind of walk up to the very edge and peep over. And there are videos that you can find on YouTube so you can hear it. And the sound of it is really scary because it's that crackling roar of fire, and but on a massive scale, and it's really, even though I understand where it comes from, I understand what's going on, completely makes sense, it's still got such a supernatural vibe to it that I am absolutely fascinated. And if the chance ever comes for me to go wandering around Europe some more, I would love to go and drop over to the Turkmenistan, to the Darvaza gas crater, and just take a look for a minute, because it's just really neat looking. So,
Annabella, what rabbit hole did you fall down?
Nothing nearly as interesting as all of theirs. But I did learn a lot of really new things to me about tattooing because Jasper is a tattoo artist. So I've already learned a lot of the military stuff. So I knew that on that end. But for the new part with Jasper, I got to learn a lot about all their cleaning techniques and stuff. But yeah, nowhere near as interesting as all the desert stuff.
Kendall, how about you? What rabbit hole did you fall down?
Well, I'm like Annabella, nothing near as interesting as Eternal Fire and and all of that. I don't have any of that. One of the things that we did with the story was it opened up old wounds, and we ended up talking to a lot of children whose parents came out gay later, and what that was like for them and how they dealt with that. And, in secret, that I keep saying, we glossed over that at the end, but we were able to delve into what happened to his children when he did come out gay. And it was a very public coming out because he did own the social media site. And, all that stuff is really fascinating to me. Everything that y'all said, including the tattoo, like we're working on a tattoo artist now, and it's so interesting to know the vernacular and the way that they describe things and the way they say things to become more authentic. Which I want to ask a question. Can I ask a question? This is what I want to do. I don't ever want to answer the questions you ask me. I just want to ask y'all questions about what you say.
Beware, we're going to make you a host.
Okay, good. Then that means I have two questions. Annabella, what do they call the machine? They don't call it a tattoo gun, do they?
No, it is not that. And now I gotta think.
Okay, it's a pen, a coil, or a machine. What have you found? Because
I think I used machine because I was told they don't like
that word. Yeah, and I hear that all the time.
Can't blame them.
Which that's what I had always heard it as, and I had to relearn that because, like you said, we want it to be authentic,
right?
sound like we know what we're talking about.
Right. Or learn enough to be really vague.
Right.
Not dumb vague, but smart vague.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And my next question is, Kim, I'm really stuck on where you started in the beginning about you needed a more romantic name for your book. And so like I'm coming up in my head with all these ideas. Like, did you have "I Hate You Forever" as a title? What was the name of the book?
It was Desert Green Tastes Bitter.
Mhm.
And
That
somehow
was the
bitter-
name, or that
was
is
the
the
name. So
name?
the new name is The Taste of Desert Green. So we got rid of that bitterness
ta-
there.
Okay, you got the bitter out of there.
We got the bitterness out. So yeah, I liked the
Yeah.
original, but I could
Yeah.
see, especially,
Yeah.
the cover is not super. I mean, the cover has a bunch of Joshua trees on it. So I could see me wanting something that's a little bit softer. So
So you went that direction. Okay, I'm
yeah.
done. All right, go on. My questions are answered for right now. Chantal, you're coming. I know.
So Frank, how about you? What rabbit hole did you fall down this time?
Well, this book is half of it is, or actually most of it is set in Hong Kong. And I got to go, it's my second book set in Hong Kong. The last one was set in 55. And by the way, if you think you know what Hong Kong was like in 55, dear reader who's left a scathing review about how it wasn't right, no one knows because they're all dead, or most of them are in their 90s if they were adults, and it is a completely different place now. It was like a little port on the side of a hill, on one island and on the side of a hill, that then grew up, pushed up against the Chinese border until it became part of China, or was returned to China. But so by 71, when they go back, they're like, this doesn't look anything like what it looked like when we were here before, because there's all these high rises for one thing, because the Chinese keep pushing people into the colony, and they keep having to deal with all that and build more and more high rises. So I got to go down that rabbit hole. There's a fabulous website for people who are expats or just who still live there, who talk about all the different things that were in all the different places. And Hong Kong is not very big. It's bigger than San Francisco, but it's not very big. And so like, if you want to know what was on such and such street, you just look in this website and put in the name of the street, and you'll find out like these different restaurants and different things that were there and when they were there. Not quite as organized as I would personally like it, but I could like find all sorts of different things. And I did spend, because I felt like I didn't do this very well the last time, I did spend some time. I found, thank you, Hong Kong SAR government, for having all of these maps that I couldn't find before. But I found all these road maps from the 70s on their website, and which I guess they're using in order to figure out land titles, because that was a major cluster bunny that was left over from when the British left, because it was all crown land, and crown land means nobody owns anything. You're renting it from the crown. And so the Chinese government and the SAR are trying to figure out how to deal with that. And so they have like all these, kind of like in California when there were the Spanish land grants and everybody's trying to figure out exactly who owned what. It's a similar situation. But the nice thing is I found these maps. So I was able to do drives where I'm like, okay, we're going to go down this road so that we end up here, and what's along the road. That's one of my favorite things to do in a book, because it gives real sense of place and time. So that was the rabbit hole I went down. But I do want to mention another little rabbit hole that has turned out to be this astonishing synchronicity, and it came from this book up here, The Sword of Social Life. There's a scene in this book where Nick and one of his friends go to see a play at the ACT in San Francisco, and it's a play by Paddy Chayefsky, who wrote Network, and he also wrote there's a movie in the 50s that everybody loves, and I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, he's a very prolific writer for stage and screen and TV. And he wrote a play called The Latent Heterosexual. So when I'm setting things up for the time period that I'm writing in, I'm going through the papers and reading like all the articles. And there's this play that's being mentioned everywhere called The Latent Heterosexual. And it's a play about this guy who is gay, and his accountant says you really need to get married so that you can get a tax break. And so then Chayefsky, he premiered the play in Dallas for reasons, because he had a really bad relationship with the Broadway scene. So he was like, he did this play in Dallas and they hated it. Then he did it in San Francisco and they hated it, but he did it in London and they loved it. Who knows why? Hilariously or weirdly or synchronistically or something, so The Latent Heterosexual has had one, I think it was shown in the 80s, because it's a really depressing show that basically is the main character sitting on stage preaching about and becoming kind of metamorphosis, becoming a heterosexual on the stage. And that was Chayefsky's idea of a really great twist. So, but nobody really ever produces it anymore. But in the little theater circuit, community theater circuit, there's a play called Love, Sex, and the IRS, which the theater I volunteer for is putting on in January. And when I saw what it was about, I was like, this is a ripoff of Petty Chayefsky's play. It's exactly the same story, except with drag queens and it's happy and fun and everybody enjoys themselves. But I'm like, it's set in it's set in 1971. It's basically a ripoff of this earlier play. And so I've been going around to the board being like, we need to do something about this. Well, we need to acknowledge where it came from, because apparently the guy who wrote it doesn't acknowledge his source material. But I thought that was really weird that I even didn't know about it. And that then the Playhouse here would have it on their schedule for January. I hate the story, and it was very interesting to read all the reviews in the papers about how many people really hated the story also. And Chayefsky never wrote another play after that. He didn't live very much longer, but he just kind of had it with playwriting by that point. So anyway, that's the other rabbit hole that I went down that just keeps bubbling up everywhere.
So Chantal, how are you going to follow that up? What rabbit hole did you guys fall down?
I'm with Kindle and Annabella. I don't have anything near as interesting as the rest of y'all. This book, in previous books, I've had some interesting stuff. In this book, it really was about Greer loves to make cocktails. So I would, trying to figure out what cocktail he was going to make was loads of fun. And Storm cooks. So
I like that kind of research.
I know, cooking and cocktails.
Too.
Cocktails and food. Bring it on.
And then you have to sample them.
Exactly. Yes. That's, I find, I'm like, oh, what kind of cocktail? And an hour later, I'm, still haven't decided what cocktail he's making, but I have a list of cocktails I want to make. But yeah, it was, and, always the rugby, it's always learning more and, watching a video and then watching another video, and, and then I'm watching the All Blacks, I'm like, oh, they're so fun to watch. But yeah, nothing as interesting as the rest of y'all.
I think I need to go down a rugby rabbit hole myself.
Oh, yes. Oh, they are just lovely. Lovely.
One time I tried to write off a big liquor store purchase because I had gone to try, and they were like, really, you can't. And I was like, no, really. It's in the book. I've got it right there. It's $170 at the liquor store to try to make those intricate drinks.
That's why you make sure you put the recipe in the book, and that way it was research.
It's research. Everything is research.
And you do want to research, because you don't want to put something in and then find out later that you think it's disgusting.
Right.
For years I thought absinthe was just this magical, lovely drink. And then one year my husband for Christmas imported me a bottle from France, and I opened it up and took a swallow, and that stuff tastes.
You didn't pour it over a sugar cube?
I was going to say, there's a reason you take it with a sugar cube.
Yeah.
Oh, that wouldn't have helped. Oh, and it's disgusting. And I didn't realize, but what we did learn is that it's really good if you have a cough take a shot of absinthe and you will not cough for hours. So it's really good cough medicine.
Well,
Home remedies here, folks. Like,
so that's tonight's tip for your health care. But before we get out of here, we want to make sure everybody knows where to find all of you guys and add all these books to the to be read pile, because summer love is not over yet. So because there's no adults in the room, I'm going to go backwards. So Annabella, you are up first. Where can we find website, social media, and of course, this latest release?
Let's see. My website is AnnabellaMichaels.com. I know that's difficult. And also I have a Facebook group that's Annabella's Sassy Sidekicks. And then this book is on Amazon, and it is also available on KU. If you have Kindle Unlimited, all of my books are on there.
Misty?
Well, I am Misty Massey on Facebook. I'm Misty Massey on Twitter. I'm Misty Massey 9 on TikTok. So don't forget the 9. I do have a website, mistymassey.com. I tried to make it easy for you guys. And if you're not in the mood for reading websites, if you want to go listen to some silliness, you can find me as a cast member on the Authors and Dragons sister show, The Calamity Janes. And you can find us at authorsanddragons.com.
Kim?
So I'm Kay Fielding Writes just about everywhere. So my website's kfieldingwrites.com. I am not brave enough. I'm too old for TikTok, so I'm not there. But I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter as Kay Fielding Writes. And on the book, which is The Taste of Desert Green, it's available at all the bookstores.
Chantal?
So I'm chantalmer.com. And Susan and I have a website, which is shelleyandmare.com. And I'm on Instagram and Facebook, Twitter. I am on TikTok, but not really. Like, I don't really do stuff because I just feel like I don't get it. I feel like I'm old and I don't get it. And our book will be out on the 23rd, but it's up for pre-order all over the place. And it's Surprise. Oh yeah, I should probably say the name, right?
Yeah, what is the name of it? Surprise.
Yeah.
Frank?
My website is frankwbutterfield.com. I'm also on Facebook. I was on TikTok, and then I got freaked out and I got off. I'm a little bit on Instagram, but not really. So Facebook is the place to find me, or my website. All of my books are on Amazon and Kindle Unlimited. And yeah, there you go.
And Kindle?
You can find me at KindleAlexander.com or Kindle Alexander everywhere. And one thing I want to say is I've made the decision to go wide. And so I'm taking books out of KU and going wide. And y'all, it's been very successful. I'm just telling you up there, it's been very successful. Are any of y'all wide, or are you all on KU?
I have 2 books
Wide.
wide.
I tried to go wide, and it was actually a disaster.
We've been doing this for a while, like you, and we used to be wide, but it's gone remarkably well. Like,
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
And congratulations.
yeah, I'm happy about that too. But I just wanted to share that because it was a real big decision. What do you do? Do you do that? Do you risk it? Do you try? And we're about halfway there now on getting them loaded. It's a lot of work to load all that.
Well, and I've had the pleasure of being your host this evening, Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, the Speculative Fiction Academy.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And we will see everybody soon. Go stack up those to be read piles. Night, everybody.
Good night.
Night.